Welcome to Evergreen Views on KXPA, the locally produced public affairs show that throws the spotlight on issues affecting you around the Puget Sound and beyond. I'm your host and producer, Marion Charatan. I'm here with marriage and family therapist Patty Fleischmann, and we are going to talk about a very important subject. Hi, Patty.
Hi, Marion.
Thank you for being on Evergreen Views. You are the president of an organization called StolenYouth. How did you come up with the idea for StolenYouth, and what is your mission?
So the mission of StolenYouth is to end child trafficking in Washington State. And we inspire action, fundraise, and build and invest in coalitions to dismantle the marketplace exploiting children for sex. And I became involved in this issue actually after seeing a film called Soul, produced by Jane Charles, also one of the founders of StolenYouth. And it was a story of a young girl trafficked out of her village in Nepal into the brothels of India. And, after seeing this film, I was so outraged and horrified that this could be happening in our world that I thought, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to see what's going on there and see for myself, which I did. And of course, it was as horrible as I thought it would be. But I was also incredibly inspired by what they were doing there with very little resources. The organization on the ground near the brothels, rescuing these kids and housing them and providing them the wraparound services that they need. And I remember going to an orphanage where these kids were housed and they were dancing and happy. They were learning computer skills and being educated and just really taken care of. So I left, although saddened by what goes on in our world. I was also very inspired to make a difference and came home and thought, okay, what's going on in our own backyard? Gathered about 10 like-minded women, all very interested and passionate about this issue of child trafficking. And we did research and found out that there was a big problem in our own backyard and decided to start a nonprofit to raise awareness and raise funds for the organizations doing the work on the ground here in Seattle.
Thank you for the work you're doing, and it was sobering to read on your website that Seattle is one of the worst cities in the United States for the sexual exploitation of children, and the median age of a kid on the street is just 13. What kind of atrocities are you seeing being perpetrated on children in this area here in Seattle, Patty?
Well, they're all atrocities. These children are being stalked, and these predators are highly sophisticated, and they are grooming these young kids. I mean, our advocates that we support are seeing kids as young as 11 years of age. And how they groom them, a lot of this is online now, is they let them know that they're loved by this person, that this person will take care of them, that they'll buy them clothes, that they are the only one that loves them. And they can do this for months online and then create an opportunity to meet. And after that, they are under the influence and in this trauma bond with these predators. And they can be used for sex for men up to 8 to 9 times a night. They are used for many different horrific, I don't even want to go into that online. Child trafficking actually occurs when a minor exchanges anything of value for sex. That could be money, food, a place to sleep for the night. Fun is never a part of this equation. It's not uncommon for these children to be trafficked by family members. We have a recent police sting here in Seattle. They posted a fake ad online for the sale of a 15-year-old girl. And that ad received 250 unique buyers calling for this child within 2 hours.
Unbelievable, Patty.
Yeah.
There's a lot of sick people out there, and these internet predators, they don't just prey on kids over the internet. What about on the streets? I mean, Aurora is notorious in Seattle for pimps. You just have to drive up and down and you see it.
Exactly, and on Pack Highway. It's just that a lot of the survivors are saying, it's gone from the street corner to the smartphone. Because of the internet, it's just tripled the numbers of kids that we are seeing. And it's much easier for them to sell these children online. I often say, it shouldn't be. It's outrageous to think that you could sell a child as easily as you could, or you could buy a child online as easily as you could buy a slice of pizza.
What price are they asking to buy a child? It's shocking, really.
Yeah, I really, it ranges from $100 to $500. And they've also noted that the average time of day that these buyers are buying these children is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, which really affects businesses.
Definitely. Have they done a profile on these criminals who are, quote, buying kids, interested in purchasing human beings?
What we do know is that 52% of the victims in King County are African American, while, as you know, African Americans make up maybe 7% of our population. And the buyers make up, I want to say, about 84% of white privileged males.
Wow. Are more girls affected than boys, or are there equal numbers in terms of victims?
I would say that, there's about 82% of girls, maybe boys are about 13%, but there are other statistics, other studies that show that it's half and half. But I think the boys, it's harder for them to report. There's a lot, there's shame for girls as well, but there's a lot of shame for boys thinking somebody's going to think I could have done something, could have ran away, I could have fought back. So there's just not as much reporting.
The title Stolen Youth is really fitting. What, in your professional judgment, does sexual exploitation do to the soul of a young person?
Oh, goodness. The trauma is so deep and so layered that we see even survivors that are working either in the field or in other fields be triggered very easily by something that they just they don't expect. It could be walking into a hotel room. It could be walking into a business. It could be not feeling like they're not safe. A lot of anxiety, depression, PTS, post-traumatic stress for these young kids, poor behavior, academic performance in school, a lot of shame, stigma. There's a stigma attached if somebody knows that they were in the life. Substance abuse, very, very high. Difficulty with intimate relationships, and at a much higher rate. At a much higher risk for suicide and self-harm. There's so many long-term effects, and that's why we're trying to raise awareness early with education in the schools, talk to men about buying children for sex. There's classes that are mandated. There's Google ads that we support. There's chatbots to disrupt the point of sale. We're working on this issue from so many different angles, from awareness, the demand, prevention, and then services for these young kids.
And they certainly do need and deserve the services. I'm talking with marriage and family therapist Patty Fleischmann, who is the president of StolenYouth. She is also in private practice in Seattle. And StolenYouth is a wonderful organization that's fighting child sex trafficking. Patty, you also said that there was a big problem with kids in foster care. Could you elaborate on this?
Okay. Yeah. So according to the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office, 62% of sex-trafficked children come from unstable housing or are homeless. So a number of factors contribute to this. A child may end up in foster care because of previous abuse, and they've normalized it. There's financial incentive for fostering. Children normalize the idea of being used for financial gain. Because of neglect or lack of resources, children get lost in the system, so no one's paying attention, and they're easy prey for these predators. Poverty obviously leads to desperate acts to get food and shelter. The children that are being moved from foster care to foster care are highly susceptible to being trafficked. Foster parents are not always properly screened, can also be part of the trafficker, might be the trafficker. And when any child is isolated or marginalized or vulnerable because they aren't in a stable housing situation, they are prime targets for these predators.
It's such a complicated and sad situation with these kids who are being exploited. Is there anything that you have learned that surprises you?
I think I was incredibly surprised by the lack of a profile for the buyer, that I couldn't tell you in this interview that it was a certain type of, they're generally men, obviously, buying these children, that it really crosses all socioeconomic barriers, boundaries, cultural, age, everything. It can be a police officer, it can be a pastor, it can be a tech worker, it can be your uncle, it can be your brother, it can be the guy down the street. There's just no profile for it. And this white privileged male buying kids of color was really a hard one for me to swallow.
Definitely.
Really tough.
Do you have advice for people if they see warning signs in others someone they feel might potentially become a predator, and who they should report this to?
Become a predator or looking for children that might be in that situation?
Someone who possibly or you've met who you think might be a potential danger to children. Who do you report this to?
Who do you report this to? Yeah, there's a national hotline. You could certainly go to our website, and that number is on the website. We tell a story of a flight attendant who noticed a young girl in a situation where she looked very nervous and unkempt, and she was going to the bathroom, and the gentleman she was with wanted to follow her into the bathroom, and this flight attendant suspected that this might be a trafficking situation, and she required the man to not go into that bathroom and to wait, and she left a note saying if this child is in trouble to please give her a sign, which she did, and the trafficker was arrested.
Wonderful that she could see that, Patty.
Yes.
An alert flight attendant.
Yeah, and she's been honored for that. She's amazing. And there's another situation where somebody was on a plane and she saw that somebody was trying in the seat in front of her, that a buyer was trying to buy a child on the internet. She could see the computer and reported that, and he was also arrested. So what to look for is more of the situation with a man and the child. If a child looks nervous, there are signs of physical abuse, bruises, cuts, injuries. Obviously for schools, unexplained absences from class or being tired in class, inappropriately dressed, sexualized behavior, withdrawn, depressed, might be that they're bragging about having a lot of money or shoes or accessories. Certainly tattoos. They can be a symbol of money or a barcode. We've seen that a lot. And there's almost a vacant sort of scripted answer when they're questioned, that people in the healthcare professions and truck stops and airlines and hotels and businesses are being trained now about what to look for.
That's good. That's good. That's a big improvement that we need all around. Mm-hmm. What types of intervention are you and other professionals in the psychology field offering to help these kids? Are there services for housing or mentoring or counseling?
Yeah, and I would say that, interestingly enough, Stolen Youth doesn't really have anything to do with my personal practice. I got into this based on my need to do something more. I have a healthy practice with adults. I don't work with children. But when I saw this film and when I recognized that this was a problem in our own backyard, I just couldn't look away. So founding Stolen Youth with these 10 other women was based more on activism than it was on my practice. Now, I think it's a good thing that I have this experience, so when I'm with survivors and they're traumatized or triggered, I can act quickly. For example, we had a survivor speak at our luncheon 2 years ago. I'll call her JS. And she was 15 years old when she was trafficked. She had come from a very intact family. This is not a situation where it's happening over there. This was in our own backyard. Parents together, brother in college. She had received a bad grade. She ran away for the night with her friends, and they got caught up with the wrong people. And she was trafficked for about 118 days before she was rescued by law enforcement and brought into services and integrated back into her family. And she was practicing for her speech. This was her first time in front of an audience of 1,000 people. We have an annual fundraiser every year. We've had them, this will be our seventh next year, sorry. And at the hotel where we were having the fundraiser, she was practicing, and she became very emotional, and almost to the point where I thought, she's not going to get through this. And the therapist in me, and certainly the mother in me, went to her and just said, you do not need to do this tomorrow. You've come this far. You should be incredibly proud of yourself. You're a rock star, and we are proud of you. And she looked at me, and with all the strength in the world and the empowerment, she just said, I have to do. And she got up on that stage in front of 1,000 people and brought the house down. And we raised $1 million that year. She got a standing ovation, and she was incredibly empowered. And that was a beautiful thing to see. But it was a good thing that I had the experience I did to understand the kind of triggering and trauma she was experiencing. And it just happened recently. I was at another talk, and a survivor was very triggered, and I was able to work with her to bring her back to her ground. And then she was able to speak. And that was an incredible thing. But what we are doing, I think, in answer to your bigger question, is StolenYouth funds 5 organizations that are doing the work on the ground. And each organization is attacking the problem from a different angle. So we give money to youth care for the advocates that reach these kids, and they bring them to services. They have the housing and wraparound services. We also grant money to an organization called Organization for Prostitution Survivors, and they also do services for survivors. We grant money to an organization called BEST, Businesses to End Slavery and Trafficking, and they go into hotels and train hoteliers and businesses on what to look for. They're incredible. Another organization, CCYJ, founded by Justice Bobby Bridge, they have a data collecting program that we support to give us some demographics on who these kids are throughout the state. And lastly, we support an organization called Seattle Against Slavery, and they're doing this work in the technology field, where they've created a chatbot that can disrupt the point of sale. So if a buyer goes online to buy a child, this chatbot will confuse the buyer, and the buyer never gets to the child. And as of today, I think they've reached over 10,000, or it disrupted 10,000 attempts to buy children online.
That's great.
And it's incredible. And that's where the field is going, because you can't arrest your way out of this situation. You can have these stings, and you can continue to raise awareness, and you can arrest these buyers, but you have to get to, there's so many of them. This is the second largest money-making industry in the world, second to drugs. It is a $42 billion industry. We are talking about big money.
What a scourge to society, and I have to compliment you very much for the great work you're doing with StolenYouth. Your event's coming up in February of 2019. Do you need volunteers, Patty?
Our annual luncheon is April 29th at the Hyatt Regency, and that's our annual event. But the Seattle Hotel Association has chosen us as their recipient for the next 3 years, and they do a fundraiser for us on February 2nd, and we would love volunteers for that.
And how does someone get in touch who's listening and would like to volunteer for this worthy cause, to say the least?
Absolutely. Go onto the StolenYouth.org website. There'll be a name and number and a place for them to sign up to volunteer, to find out more information, and somebody will get right back to them.
Thank you so much for your time today on Evergreen Views. Appreciate it, and the great work and information you've given us.
Well, thank you, Marion, for being interested and so compassionate about this issue.
It's a pleasure, and it's sad that you have to work on something like this, that something like this exists, and it's so widespread. Thanks again for your time. That's Patty Fleischmann, who is president of StolenYouth and a marriage and family therapist in the Seattle area. In Seattle alone, 300 to 500 kids are bought and sold and exploited every day. Again, see StolenYouth.org for volunteer opportunities to fight child human trafficking and protect children. To help a child you suspect is being trafficked, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. Again, the number 1-888-373-7888. Or text HELP to 233733. 24 hours, 7 days a week in English, Spanish, and 200 other languages. Join me next weekend, Saturday and Sunday, both nights from 8:30 to 9 p.m. for a look at the issues affecting Puget Sound and beyond on Evergreen Views. For AM 1540 KXPA, I'm Marion Charatan. Have a great week.